All right, welcome back to the isometric grid projects. In this tutorial, we're going to cover how to bring your line work from Illustrator to Photoshop and apply color. And so here we are in Illustrator, and I have my document all on this line layer. And you can see that not every line is perfect. This is something you want to be aware of. So if you have an issue, like this line here, you could click on it with the white arrow and make sure it's connected. So I'm going to undo that just so that you can see what would happen if you don't have it connected. And you don't want just crazy shapes kind of laying out. This isn't obviously complete. This is a more of a tester. You can see here Akila's, she's a student of mine who did this wonderful image here that has everything set up and it is all connected. That's more what you want. But for demonstration purposes, this works out okay. So what I want to share with you is that, and then also make sure that you have each shape be transparent. So for example, if this has, let's go to the properties tab, if this has like a white fill, or any of the shapes have a white fill, you want to change it to the transparent, which is the red slash. So you can do that a couple different ways. You can simply in your layers just click on the little circle here next to your line art layer, and you'll have that selected, and then you can click on the question mark for the fill and switch the red slash. Question mark just means there's different fills in there, and red slash will make sure that everything has a red slash. So with it still selected, I can click in here, make sure it's still selected, and I can go to edit and go down to copy. Hotkey is Control C, and then eventually I will paste it, which is Control V. And these are sort of universal hotkeys, so I'm going to go ahead and hit Control C, and then I'm going to go over to Photoshop here. And in Photoshop, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new document. I'm going to go File, New. And I have a vertical composition. I chose that orientation, but if you have the horizontal, you would click on this little icon here. But you first want to click on tabloid, that's the correct size, and then choose either vertical or horizontal, and then click Create. Once you do that, you can then hit Control V or choose the Edit and the Paste command, and it will pop in here. Now you get this little menu here. And what you want to do is set this to Smart Objects. Sometimes this Add to Current Library will be checked. You can uncheck that. That is really important because it usually takes extra time to transfer it into your library from one software package to another, and it's just better to keep that unchecked and just leave Smart Object checked and then just click OK. At that point, you can move it up and down or leave it into its position and hit Enter or Return. I'm going to scale mine up just a tad, so I'm just going to grab a corner here. If there's any adjustments you have to do, basically do that now, and then just basically hit Enter or Return. At this point, you can see this little Ghostbuster symbol that I have with the Paint Bucket tool. I can't paint on this later because it's a smart object. What I'm going to do is I'm going to rename this selection layer, because this is essentially what that is. I'm just going to rename it selection for short, but this is essentially your selection layer. So you're going to use the wand tool to select in here. So the wand tool has the hotkey of W, and it's with the quick selection tool or the object selection tool. And you can rotate through these by holding down Shift W until you see the magic wand icon, or again, mouse down on it and go down to get to the magic wand tool. Once you do that, you can click on an area very easily. You can see here. Notice what happens when I click on the open shape. It selects the entire outside here. So that's a very common thing. If you don't have complete closed paths, that's what will happen. So you can hold the Shift key to add a couple different selections very easily. And if you ever need to deselect, you can go to the Select menu up here and choose Deselect, hotkey Control D. Now we're not going to pan this layer, so we need to add a new layer. So let's click on the little plus icon down here next to the trash can. That'll add a new layer. The other way you can do that is choose Layer and go to New and choose Layer from the command menu at the top. It also has this hotkey of Control Shift N. So I'm going to double click on the layer 1 and rename it. I'm going to call it Paint, short for Paint Layer. And basically that's what I'm going to have set up. Now you can have multiple layers here if you want. With other paint layers, that's totally fine. For example, maybe we want a background color. So I can add another layer here and call it New Background or something like that. Sometimes I call it Color Background. I think I'll just call this one New Background. And in here I can use a tool like the Gradient tool, which has the hotkey of G, and you can shift through it by hitting Shift G and you can rotate through the paint bucket and the gradient tool. And there's also the 3D material drop tool, which you don't want to use for this particular project, but the gradient tool is kind of a cool tool. If you click on it up here at the top, you get the options for it. And basically, you can click in here and you can see what you got. Under the basics menu, we got transparency or sort of a solid gradient. I'm going to choose the transparent gradient, and if I click and drag across, you can kind of see what happens here and get a gradient. Now if I want a solid color, I could do that. So I'm going to undo that command and choose the paint bucket, and I could just drop in a flat red if I wanted to. But instead of that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to save the background for later. I'm going to show you how to paint and select on the layers here. So let's grab the magic wand tool, and let's select a couple of these shapes here. Again, I'm on the selection layer. I'm going to hold the shift key, select a couple of those, and then I'm going to click on the paint layer, and I'm going to switch to my paintbrush tool, which has the hotkey of B. Now I can access the brush options here or at the top here. And if you don't see the brush icon here with the brush engine, what you can do is go to the window menu and go down to brushes, and then that will pop up. And you can see here there's lots of choices to choose from. I'm going to start with just a soft brush here. If you want to change the size of the brush, you can drag a little slider here. You can also use the bracket keys. The right bracket makes it bigger, and that's next to the P key on the keyboard. Left bracket makes it smaller. And so now I can just paint in these areas like that. Pretty easy to do, right? If you want to drop the opacity, you can basically adjust and blend different colors. So if I want to add like a darker red on here, I can start to do that. And now I've got sort of a gradient effect here. Again, select on your selection layer, paint on your paint layer. So if I want to select another area, I can grab the wand tool, click in here. If I want to select a couple different areas, I can hold the shift key, go back to paint. Then I can click in the color picker, pick whatever color I want. Click OK, and I can switch to my paintbrush tool and literally paint that in, right? However color I want. Right now it's an opacity of 26%. So as I keep painting, it's going to get darker and darker, essentially creating a gradient effect here, right? So let me just show you if I click on the new background layer and drop in a solid color now. Let me grab something like maybe a yellow of some sort. Maybe this kind of creamish yellow, it's a little bit green right now. Let me drag this down just a tad here. Something like that will work. And if I click in here and paint the background, you can see it's not affecting these areas I have selected because of the stacking order. So if I drag the background above it, it would be hidden underneath it. So you just got to make sure your background layer is below, selection layer the next one, and then any paint layers you want on top. Basically, you just keep repeating that process. Now there's lots of features you can play with the paintbrush. Let me go ahead and select another layer here, and I'll kind of demonstrate. Again, I want to be on the selection layer when I select. Just be aware of that. And I'm going to switch to my paintbrush tool, and I want to be on the paint layer. Click on the paintbrush, and there are some cool texture brushes in here. I'm going to go ahead and click one of these, and in the texture option, if you click on the word texture, there is some textures in here you can play around with. And if you open it up, there's texture libraries, which are really cool. So there's like some water textures here, but there's this little gear icon. If you click on, there's some other patterns and textures you can import just by clicking on the import button. You can bring them in. I'm just going to stick with these I have in here and click out, and you can kind of see this groovy kind of texture you got going on here. Except I have to switch the color because that was the same color I had there. Let me choose. Actually, let me just show you real quick. You can select the color from that's on here. If you hold the Alt key, you get the eyedrop tool or Option key on a Mac. So I'll select that red there, and I'll make my brush a little bit bigger with the right bracket key, and I just click here. You can see that kind of pattern that's being created there. It's very transparent because I have the opacity dropped, but I'm going to bring it back up to 100% and just do a couple of clicks here, and you can start to see what happens. If I want to make it sure it covers the whole thing, just make my brush a little bigger, and then a single click there, and you can see the effect. So basically, you just have fun creating all kinds of interesting textures. You can see here are textures and painting that's being done from Akila's image. She also added characters. Anything else you want to add in here, you can totally do that. The last thing I want to share is see how she added some color to the lines. I'm going to demonstrate how to do that right now. So with your line work, you can do it a couple different ways. You can select the selection layer again, which is the line work. You can double click on the layer and basically open up your layer styles. So your style effects, you can add a color overlay and pick whatever color you want. So if I change this back to normal and then click in here and pick whatever color I want, maybe I want red or maybe I want some blue, and click OK, you can see here that the color that I have just created is now replacing the line. And it's this effect here I can turn on and off basically, and you can see it being represented there. Now what I want to do is basically color just some lines a different color. That's what happened with Akila's work. You can see here she did some lines are in orange, some are in blue, some are in yellow. So I want to share how to do that real quick. I'm going to add a new layer by clicking the little plus symbol, and I'll rename this colored line, or colored lines maybe. So on this layer, again, I'm going to paint, but I'm going to select on this layer. The way I'm going to select this, I'm going to select all these lines by holding the control key and click on the thumbnail. You can see the marching ants everywhere. And I can zoom in here and choose whatever ones I want to paint. So I'm going to switch to my paintbrush tool and make sure I'm in the color lines layer. I don't want to use this texture brush, so I'm going to pick another brush here. So I'm going to go back to the brush tip shape option, and I'll choose the soft brush here and just click out. And I'll make it a little bit bigger, so again, using the right bracket key. This time I can pick some other color. Maybe I'll pick yellow, or maybe a green would be kind of fun. So I'll go ahead and just to demonstrate, I'll just paint a little bit here, just painting across these little lines here. Then I could pick another color. Maybe I want to pick like a yellow. And so now I'll have like a transition from yellow to green and then blue. To deselect, again, go to select and then deselect, or Control D is the hotkey. But now you can see the color of the lines are all changing. So the final thing I want to just share real quick is this issue here with this open line. If I do select that area, you'll see what happens immediately. If I click in here and then I try to paint, I'll go ahead and add a new layer to demonstrate this, just so it's easier to see. And I'll go ahead and I'll drop in this yellow here with the paint bucket and click. You can see it has painted everywhere and almost in the background here, essentially create another new background. So the reason why is because this is an open path here. So I'm going to go ahead and undo that and hit Control D to deselect. So just make sure you have your lines complete in Illustrator before you do any of the painting in Photoshop. So this concludes this tutorial of the isometric design project. Hopefully you get something really cool done. Again, it's going to take a little bit of time to kind of paint out, but you can have fun exploring paint and texture and color in Adobe Photoshop. Until next time, cheers!